Hello there, my name is Ismas, and this is part 2 of our tutorial of making this chair. So in part 1, I made this top here, but I went on and completed the chair off screen because I thought the process would be repetitive since we are basically making the same thing. Again, I used the bend modifier in the same way that I created this top part. So I did that off screen, but if you want to see the entire process of making the entire chair, I have a time-lapse version of that on my main channel, top channel 1-on-1, so you can just go and subscribe to that and watch that for the complete time-lapse of the process. So in this part, let's look at UV unwrapping this chair and see how we can best achieve the best UVs for this chair. So to do that, we are going to create a material that will let us see where the UVs are stretching. So let's go to the shading tab and add a new material. Select any object, add a new material, and we want to add an image texture that can let us see the stretching of the UVs. So if you hold down Shift A, you can get this add menu, and now we can add an image texture, and you can create a new image. If you had an image, you can just import it here, but we want an image that can easily tell us where the stretching is. So in Blender, you just create a new material here, a new image, and you can name it whatever you want, but in the generate type, you want to switch this from blank to UV grid. This is a square grid that will show you a square pattern that can let you see where the stretching is on your UVs or on your mesh. So you can also preview the image here after you created it. After you create it here, let me rename it to grid here so that I can pick it here. So after you add it here, it should also be available for you to preview here. So if I go here, you can see it's called grid, and this is a square grid, as you can see here. So if we map it on our object, if there is no stretching in our UVs, the grid should still remain a square grid on our mesh. So let's feed the color output to the base color input of our principal shader, and you can see how this looks. You already see that we have a significant amount of stretching on our mesh because we haven't done any UVs here, so our UVs are quite stretched and messed up. So let's also apply the same material for this. So I'll call this UV grid so that I can easily see the material. So I want all the other objects to have the same material, so I'll just select the mesh, then UV grid, apply the same material. You can see on this object we don't see anything because there is no UVs for this object. So let's also do the same here, and you can see for this, some areas are UVs, have UVs, others don't have. So we need to start marking UVs for this. So I think let's start with the easiest shape of these. So I'll select this, hold on Shift H to hide everything. If you want to unhide everything, you can hold on. You can do Alt H to unhide all the elements that are hidden. So I want to just focus on this, so I'll just hide everything else. Shift H. Now, if we go to UV editing, let me zoom in on this. So to zoom in, just hold down your numpad period key to see that. I'll also switch back to textured mode so that I can see the texture. That will enable me to see the UV grid. So if you select this, you can see that we don't have any UVs. If you go to edit mode, where you can preview the UVs and make sure you are in the UV editing tab, you see we don't have any UVs here. So we need to mark seams on our mesh, which simply tells Blender where we need to cut the mesh so that we can flatten it out on a surface to make the UVs. So I think we can add a seam here, which is basically a way of telling Blender where to cut the UVs. So I can hold on Alt and double click on this loop to select that entire ring and use Ctrl E to mark a seam. Ctrl E and then mark seam from the menu. That will add a seam on our mesh. So if you're using Blender 2.8, the new version of Blender 2.8, and right click and hit you can see we got the UV mapping menu. You can switch on live UV. This means that you can add seams, and Blender will live update the UV seam for you in the UV preview. So if we unwrap this again, you can see how we are starting to see some of the squares, but there's still some stretching going on. So also another thing, whenever you are trying to UV an object, make sure you apply a scale and rotation, because if your scale is off, it will also stretch the UVs as well. So apply scale and rotation, and then let's UV again. You can see how the UVs have changed, and now we can see that we are getting more squares than before, because when your scale is not applied, you may get some UV stretching. You also see we have a lot of stretching here. This is caused by the subdivision surface. If we turn that off, you can see there is no stretching, but if we turn that on, we have stretching. And another reason that you might have stretching there, because sometimes you really want the subdivision on, but it is going to cause some stretching here. So if you want to get rid of this stretching, make sure you have a supporting loop so you need to have this seam between two edge loops. So what I'm saying is that instead of adding a seam here, if we added it here, there would be minimum stretching than we have here, because we don't have any supporting loop before this seam. So if we select this and Control E, clear seam, and then select this, Control E, mark seam, make sure you marking seam, mark seam. You can see now we have less stretching than what we had before, because we have two supporting loops here and here. So if you don't want the seam to be there, Control E, and you wanted it to be here, Control E, but you're getting this stretching, what you can do is just select this face, insert it so that we have a supporting seam, a supporting loop here. Make sure that this is not too far. So that we have a supporting loop around here, but this, because we duplicated it from this, it is also being marked as a seam. So I'll right click it, select that loop, and clear that seam. So that is the supporting edge loop for this seam. And you can see we have minimum stretching, and I think this is good enough. If you want, you can also add extra seams around here. Let me see how our UVs look, but I think this is okay. Sometimes you won't be able to get rid of all the stretching, so you might want, let's just leave that there, because I don't. But if you wanted to minimize that, you can just come in here, select a loop, Control E, make sure it's between two seams, otherwise you're going to have that issue where the seam is kind of pulling through. Make sure, let me zoom in here so that I can see the seam selecting. Let me turn off subdivision surface. So I want to select a loop that is between two edge loops, and then mark that as a seam, so that the loops on the opposite sides act as supporting loops. So I can see we have that, but we still have that stretching, and that's because whenever you have a ring like this, it's going to cause some stretching because of how it's UV unwrapped. If you want to have minimum stretching, you would have to cut it so that it's a straight ring. Sorry, so that is a straight kind of plane. I don't know. So what I mean is that so you see this is a ring here, and this kind of causes a lot of stretching, because you can see that the faces are kind of cutting through the different squares. So you can mark a seam like here. Again, another thing I didn't mention is that in the UV editor, you can also mark seams directly there. So you just select the edge, Control E, mark seam, and you can see now we have minimized some of the stretching. Now we still have a little bit of stretching, and some of these faces are intersecting with different squares. So you can straighten them up by selecting each loop and then scaling it in the x-axis, or right click and straighten in the x direction. Make sure you select the loop, straighten. Let's see, why is this not working? Auto align. Okay, I think it's auto align X, and then select the next. And the next, you can see how this is straightening up a bit. And then you would have to straighten up these in the y-axis as well if you want straightened edges like that. Until you get straight squares like that, as you can see. But that's a lot of work, and it doesn't really matter because the kind of texture we're going to be using here, I won't really show that much stretching. So I'll just unwrap this so that we go back to the shape we had, and maybe I'll also clear the seam here so that we go back to the original shape. This is very minimum stretching, and it won't show up in the texture we add. So let's unhide that. I'm going to quickly UV unwrap the rest of the mesh. So I'll just come in here, add a loop there, add a loop there, add a loop here, there. You want to add loops where they're not going to be visible to the camera directly, so that if there is any kind of cut seams like here, they will be away from the camera instead of directly to the camera. So Ctrl E. That's why you see I'm hiding them between different areas. I see how this has unwrapped. There is still some stretching, so let me first apply scale and rotation here, and then unwrap this again. You can see we still have some stretching, but it's not as bad as it was. And so we have a few issues here because of these kind of point where we have a lot of vertices connecting. So I can reduce those by just connecting this like this, and let me see, kind of, I think I can get away by dissolving this edge loop. Let's do the same for this area. I think this area is okay, but doesn't matter. Let me just be consistent, do the same. So this step would have been easier if we did it earlier, but I didn't kind of foresee it. So just trying to minimize those points there. So we want to reduce the number of triangles you have, and this is one way of doing that. Now if we unwrap this again, so you see that problem no longer is there. Okay, it's still there, I think, because of this triangle here. So if I was trying to minimize that, let me see if I connect this to this like this and dissolve that. See, it wasn't liking the fact that we had a square there, so we were having a triangle there. So yeah, removing that solved the issue. I think we still have it here, still have the issue here. So I'll just kind of find a way, another area to connect that where it's not too much an issue. Okay, now we're having it here. I think that is much better. Maybe I can even just do this. Nah. Again, depends how detailed you want to be and how much time you want to spend on an asset. But I think that's okay. And let's go on this. So if you have a mirror modifier on your mesh, wait before you add, wait until you add the seams before you apply the mirror modifier. So let's see, let's add a seam there. Let's just add it outside here so that it's easy to add, and do this. Let's also add it there. So these faces down here usually cause a problem. Let me show you. If we don't add seams there, so if we mark seam here, then if we unwrap this, they usually cause a lot of stretching, as you can see there. So what you usually do is add a loop that goes around that face and only leave one edge that is non-connected, so that doesn't have a seams, and you can see that will clear that kind of stretching we have there. So again, for this as well, we can do the same. Select the entire edge loop that make up that face, and select only one that doesn't have a face, and you can see that will reduce on the stretching. So we have a lot of stretching here. Let me first turn off the mirror modifier. Okay. Sometimes when you have a mirror modifier, you will have a face here, so make sure you delete that. It will cause a lot of stretching, a lot of issues in the shading and UV unwrapping. We have one single UV island, and that's, I think, what is causing this UV stretch, this stretching here. So I think I can add a loop here. Let me see, should I? Yeah, let's try adding a loop there and see what happens. Okay, that reduces some of the stretching, but I don't want this to be one single mesh like this. So let's apply the mirror modifier and see how this will look, how the island will look. Okay, so let's start working inside here and see how we can separate the different parts. So I think I can separate the legs. So I can select that loop and that loop because I know it's the loop that connects the faces, and I made sure that I select the loop between two edge loops to mark it as a seam, so that I reduce on the stretching that would cause that would be caused if I didn't do that. So also, when you are creating UVs, make sure that the islands you use, you don't end up with a lot of empty space on your islands in your UV area. So let's mark a seam there, mark a seam there. Basically, I'm just separating the legs so that we better utilize, so that we utilize this UV space even better. So if you want to see what part of the edge you have selected, you can turn on this icon here, and when you select any edge in the UV editor, it can show you where that edge is. So I think we can, this seam here can be removed. Whenever you see when you select one edge, the other edge is selected, it means that this edge shares the same edge in the editor, sorry, in the UV space, in the 3D space. So I think we can clear some of those so that we reduce on the UV space. So clear, same. You can see we have kind of zipped this into one single mesh and clear seam. So sometimes it's easier to work in the UV editor than the 3D space when you're working on the UVs. You can see this is a fairly good UV unwrap. This is not stretching, it's simply that I think it's stretching, but that's okay, it's not too much. So yeah, that's how you UV unwrap an object, and you can see how all the parts are kind of squares. Now, you see, because each object is a separate mesh, each object has its own UVs. But that's not a good idea when you are exporting these for someone else to use, or if you're going to bake the textures, because you will end up with different images for every part of the mesh. So in Blender 2.8, now you can select all objects and go to edit mode of the objects at once, and also access the UVs of each individual object into one UV, using one UV editor. So then you can hit unwrap, and the Blender will move these objects into, I will move the UVs onto the same UV space, and kind of position them to maximize the space, the UV space. But you see that the legs here are using up much UV space than the larger objects that we have in the space. That's because the scale of these objects may be different, seems to be different from the scale of the other objects here. So what you can do, let's try, let me see if I can. So you can see in the dimensions here, the scale is quite different for all the objects, and that's why we have them scaled differently. That's why the scale in the UVs is non-proportional to the scale in the 3D space. So select all the objects you want to have share the same UVs, the same UV space, and then apply scale and rotation. Okay, so this dimension I think is different settings, but if you do that and then unwrap again, you can see now those share proportional spaces relative to their size in the 3D area, and you can see now even the size of the squares is similar on all parts of the meshes, you can see. But before, let me undo this a few steps. Before, you can see that the squares on this were too big from this here, but after you select everything and apply rotation and scale, make sure you're only selecting the objects that are going to share the same UV space, and then unwrap. Then the UV space, the UV islands will be proportional to their size in the 3D space, and also the squares Blender will try to match the scale of the UVs to the scale of the objects in the 3D space. Another thing we can do here, you can see that we have a lot of unused space in our UV. You can try to repack the assets here, the UV islands here, by going under UV pack islands. That should try moving the different objects around so that they have the same, so that the space is utilized more efficiently. You can also come in here and play around with the settings here. This will the pack island settings will just give you a separation distance between the different islands, you can see. And the reason you need that is that whenever you're baking, sometimes the baked pixels will kind of bleed out of the mesh into different islands. So whenever you add a margin, it kind of helps there, so that whenever the textures bleed, they don't kind of intersect with the other UV islands you have. What else do I need to talk about here? Let me see. Oh, I think the legs have a lot of UV, have a lot of seams here, so I can reduce some of that. So I see that, let me select this island. This island shares the same edge loop with this, so that means I can clear this seam so that it becomes a single island, and that will also help on the UV space efficiency. So clear that seam, and you can see now it has changed into one single island. So let's also select this. You can see we can also clear this. As you notice, whenever I do that, also a seam in the UV editor will also be removed. So let me find another theme here so that I can demonstrate this to you better. Was that all? Yeah, I think that was all, but yeah, let's pack again. UV pack island. So it has changed the islands a bit, but you can always come in and move the islands also to maximize UV space even further, even more. So I see we have, okay, so that's still attached to that. I think this can be connected to this so that we use this space efficiently. So I'll just clear this seam as well. And now you see we have bigger islands that maximize our UV space, which is nice. And I think that's okay now. So that's UV unwrapping in Blender for you. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe. If you want to watch the entire process of modeling this in a time lapse, you can find that on my other YouTube channel, which contains other tutorials, more advanced tutorials than this, because this channel is going to be mainly focused on beginners, and yes, so the other channel is focused mainly to advanced users. Thank you for subscribing. I'll see you next.